Hello and welcome to Inside Rugby with Mark. If you're new to my channel, it's great to have you here, so thanks for joining us. I hope you'll stick around if you enjoy my content. My name is Mark. I'm a retired Kiwi bloke. I'm living in beautiful Cancun in Mexico, and I'm a huge rugby fan. The reason I started this channel is that during my retirement I wanted a hobby to do, and I also wanted to play a small role in helping the great game of rugby to grow across the world, just by sharing my passion for the game here online. So that's why I do this. I certainly don't want to be a YouTube careerist. I just definitely want to do something and give back to the great game of rugby, and that's why we're here today. So let's get into it. Today we're going to be talking about Argentina, their Rugby Championship campaign. What was good, what was bad, and what do they need to improve on? So let's get into it. Now, as a Kiwi, I can categorically say that Argentina were my team of the championship. I thought they did extremely well this year, and it was great to see the work of Felipe Contaponi and his team after they took on from Michael Cheika. And don't forget, Contaponi was the assistant manager to Michael Cheika throughout his reign with this Los Pumas team. And really, you can see a lot of consistency coming through in this Argentina team, and that's what really impressed me this year in the Rugby Championship. Of course, they did well last year in the Rugby World Cup, and it was going to be interesting to see how they went in this Rugby Championship campaign. They had a very difficult beginning of their campaign. I'm sure they would have been planning this for some time. They had to go to New Zealand to play the All Blacks in New Zealand in the two-test series, and this was going to probably be one of the biggest challenges of their entire Rugby Championship, but boy, did they hit the ground running. And what I saw of their game in Wellington in New Zealand was pretty impressive from a number of perspectives. First of all, they had to travel all the way to New Zealand, get acclimatized, and be ready to go in game one of the Rugby Championship. And before they got there, they had that series against France in Argentina. Although it was a French B team, and that's another discussion to talk about, isn't it? It was absolutely an opportunity for them to get some rhythm into their game compared. So the Wellington game against the All Blacks was going to be a real litmus test for them, and I was super impressed in that game. Yes, many of you have said that the All Blacks were useless and they created a lot of opportunities for the Argentinians, but you've got to give credit where credit's due, in my opinion. And Argentina took their opportunities in that game and came storming back in the second half. And the most important point for me in that game was they put 38 points against the All Blacks, which was hugely significant. And it just showed some of the weaknesses in the All Blacks team and their game. And I'm sure Scott Robertson went away from that game scratching his head and a little bit disappointed and frustrated. And I think the impact of that game against the All Blacks was quite significant for the All Blacks. I think it's had a lot to do with their conservatism when it's come around their selections for the remainder of the Rugby Championship. But after winning that game, it was a huge kudos to Argentina, and I'm sure they went to Eden Park with a glimmer of hope that they were going to be able to upset the All Blacks at their fortress in Auckland. That wasn't the case, and we saw an All Blacks revengeance come back in that second game. Although I thought the Argentinians did well in the last 20 minutes to try and wrestle some of the authority back. They scored more points than the All Blacks in the second half in that game. And that shouldn't be forgotten, because we've been talking about how poor the All Blacks have been in the back half of all of their games. So after the New Zealand campaign, Argentina had won one and lost one. And now it was time to take on the Australian Wallabies. And I think when Felipe Contaponi and his team went back to Argentina to take on the Wallabies in the first game at La Plata, I'm sure they had some confidence that they were going to be able to do some good things against this Wallaby side. And I think that first game was really set up for an opportunity for Argentina to look very dangerous in the Rugby Championship. Now, unfortunately, in that first game in Argentina at La Plata, we got some atrocious conditions for both teams. It was very difficult for them to play the style of rugby that they wanted to play, and we saw a huge comeback from Australia in the second half to snatch that game in the last minute from Argentina. And they ended up winning 20 points to 19, so just 1 point in it. Now, unfortunately for Argentina, I think this would have given them a bit of a dented self-belief. I'm sure they would have hoped to go home to Argentina after that All Black series and had a couple of strong wins against Australia. I'm sure they would have believed they could have done that, but they started off on the wrong foot and they ended up just losing that game. So all of a sudden, they'd won one and lost two, and that's not exactly how they wanted their campaign to start. But 1 week later, they had an opportunity in Santa Fe to turn that around, and boy, did they do it. We saw something absolutely incredible for Argentina. Some people say it was a great day at the office. I would say it was even better than that. And we saw some fantastic rugby played by Argentina in that game. Yes, you can talk about the lackadaisical Australian defence, but once again, Argentina still had to put the plays together, and they scored some brilliant tries in that game. A lot of them also to their forwards, which shows the diversity and ability they've got across the different selections in their team. I think there were a lot of people impressed with what Argentina did against Australia in that second test in Argentina. Putting 60 plus points on the Wallabies is no mean feat, no matter how bad they are. And it was a great rebuilding of confidence again, particularly knowing that the South African Springboks were about to come to Argentina, and this was going to be a great opportunity for Argentina to create a little bit of history back at home. It was 2 wins and 2 losses to Argentina at this stage of the competition, and they were heading to Santiago del Estero, a place they had chosen to give the Springboks a bit of a hard time in very hot and harsh conditions. And that's what it turned out on the day. It was over 34 degrees Celsius for the two teams, with a feel-like temperature close to the 40, so it was going to be very, very difficult. And what a game it was. It was an absolute nail-biter right to the very end, and Argentina created their own little piece of history by beating the Springboks, the world champions, the Freedom Cup winners, over there in Argentina by 1 point, 29 points to 28. It was a fantastic game. Argentina held on in the last minute, and they got that historic win. So all of a sudden, they were in with a slimmer of a chance to win this year's Rugby Championship. Who would have thought that at the beginning of the competition? Absolutely fantastic stuff from Argentina. So then they had to go to South Africa, and a bit like the All Blacks were wounded from that loss against Argentina in Wellington, the Springboks were also wounded, and it was an opportunity for Rassie to change the team again and put in what he felt was the right team to beat Argentina at Mbombela Stadium in South Africa. And that's exactly what happened. Just like we saw the All Blacks take their revenge back against the Argentinians in Auckland, we saw the Springboks do the same thing at Mbombela Stadium in South Africa, and it was a fantastic game by the Springboks. They played out of their skins, scoring some fantastic tries. And unfortunately for Argentina, I think everything got on top of them. They had too many disciplinary issues during that game. They had yellow cards, which they hadn't had throughout the Rugby Championship. They had a couple of injuries as well, and of course they had to fly all that distance with a team that had played the week before. So there was a lot against the Argentinians in this game, but take nothing away from South Africa in terms of not only winning that game but also the Rugby Championship. They were the best team in the Rugby Championship. The scoreboard doesn't lie on that occasion, and it was a great performance by them. I've absolutely loved what I've seen from this Argentinian team this year. They want to play expansive rugby, but they've got to clean a few things up. So let's talk about it right now. Now, one of the things that's obvious for me is their forwards need to have a little bit more percentage of winning ball when it comes to the set pieces. That's where one of the problems lie for Argentina. We saw it in their scrums against the All Blacks at Eden Park. We saw it again in the scrums against South Africa in South Africa. And this is a current weakness, I would say, of the Argentinian team. They need to shore up that scrum. The front row's not being effective enough. They're getting a lot of penalties against them, and they're giving their opposition relatively easy ball by the way that they're scrummaging. The lineouts have been a little bit of a hit and miss as well, and that's something else they have to clean up. So I think their set play in general needs to be looked at. As far as some of the selections go for Argentina this year, we've seen some really fantastic players. Early on in the Rugby Championship, I thought the likes of Pablo Matera, Marcos Cremer and Juan Martin Gonzalez were absolutely fantastic in the back of the scrum for the Argentinians. And then we saw in the later games Oviedo coming in and making a cameo appearance in a couple of games, and I was very impressed with him playing at number 8. So Contaponi has a couple of good loose forwards there that he can move around at the back. We saw Juan Martin Gonzalez playing in the number 6 jersey against South Africa. Oviedo came in at number 8. And I think with Marcos Creamer missing from that particular game because of injury, there had to be some reshuffle. And we saw Pablo Matera go to the bench for that game against the Springboks. Was a little bit of an interesting pick for me. So I think the loose forwards for Argentina look very, very good. They look like they can win and do some damage at the breakdown. We did see that throughout the Rugby Championship. But I think it's their tight 5 that need a little bit of work. And we saw Lavanini come in for that last game against the Springboks. He wasn't that impressive. And for me, Rubiolo and Petty had done a better job early in the Rugby Championship. Whether injury was an issue for those guys, I'm not too sure. But we'll need to see what happens at the end of the year for Argentina in those positions. And then looking at the back line, well, we saw some breakout performances this year as far as I was concerned from the Argentinian backs, in particular from Tomas Albornoz at number 10. He's playing in the URC for Benetton, of course, and he played absolutely brilliant, I thought, throughout the Rugby Championship. Even when Argentina lost, he was in there scoring tries. He scored a try against South Africa in the first game. He scored a try against South Africa in the second game, almost a duplication of what he did in that first game. And to me, he's got class written all over him. And I think with another year under his belt in that number 10 jersey for Argentina, I think this is going to be a really, really good tactic from Argentina to have that guy running the team. Now what this also does is it frees up Santiago Carreras, who we've seen typically in that number 10 jersey for Argentina, and having the ability to play him off the bench or at fullback now gives Argentina another strike weapon. And I'm quite excited about this because I think it's going to add to the dimension of this game. Don't forget, they've also got Cruz Amalia, who plays at fullback and can play on the wing, and he's another attacking option. So I think Contaponi here has a couple of selections in his backline that can make it versatile, cover some injuries, and also add some depth to their bench, and that excites me about this Argentinian backline. On the wing, we've seen Mateo Carreras. He had a game against South Africa in South Africa that he probably liked to forget. He got a yellow card, he dropped the ball on a couple of occasions, and normally we see him scoring tries. We saw that against Australia, we saw it against New Zealand. He's absolutely a flying winger. He's one of the best in the world, I believe, on his day, and he can score tries from anywhere in the pitch. So watching Mateo Carreras go forward with this Argentinian team is going to be exciting. And then on their inside centres, we've got Choco Barras, who unfortunately got injured and went off in that last game against South Africa. I think that had a big impact on the Argentinian team. But throughout the Rugby Championship, Choco Barras at number 12 and Sinti at number 13 were very impressive for me. We saw Sinti scoring tries early in the Rugby Championship. We saw Choco Barras doing some huge defensive work, scoring tries, but also saving tries for Argentina. And I think those two can actually create a pair a little bit like Damien Diolandi and Jesse Kriel for South Africa. I see that kind of long-term partnership coming from those two in the midfield for Argentina. So in saying all of this, I think Argentina has a pretty settled team. What they need to do now is to build their skill sets so they don't have these inconsistencies in performances. And I think if Argentina can do that, they can definitely get into the top 5 in World Rugby and start to put the pressure on as we head towards the next Rugby World Cup. I like so much about this Argentina team. I think they're well coached. I think they've got good discipline now. That's something that they had to change around from their previous exploits on the field. Let's face it, a player like Lavanini, who was going off all the time, was putting the team under pressure. But it seems as though Contaponi, except for that last game against South Africa, has got their discipline sorted out. Now what they have to do is to try and limit the amount of penalties they give away. I was watching that throughout the Rugby Championship, and whilst they might not be getting yellow cards and red cards anymore as much as they used to, they are still giving away a lot of penalties. That gives the opposition, of course, an opportunity to score points, but also put pressure on through gaining territory and possession. So that's something I think this Pumas team needs to do better as they move forward in other competitions. So one of the highlights for me in the Argentinian Rugby Championship this year was seeing Agustin Creevy score that try against the All Blacks in New Zealand. The guy played over 100 caps for Argentina. He's a legend of the game in Argentina. And as the Rugby Championship went on, We started to think a little bit less of Creevy and not remember his brilliance and importance to this Argentinian team. So my hat's off to Agustin Creevy. He played a huge role in helping this Argentinian team get to where they are through the development and mentorship of other players in the team, but also his leadership skills in general was something that Argentina really needed at the time, and he came through and delivered. So my hat's off to you, sir. You've done a fantastic service to your rugby playing nation. Now, like many of you have made mention of the fact that you'd like to see Argentina playing the top teams more regularly, and I vote for that as well. It's a very difficult situation for World Rugby and for these rugby unions to be able to put together schedules that fit in with domestic competitions and also with international commitments. And as a fan of the game, I would love to see Argentina playing the All Blacks and South Africa and England and Ireland on a much more frequent basis. I think we will have fantastic games as rugby fans, and that's something that we really need to look at, how we can create those opportunities. Also, I received a comment the other day from one of you in the comments saying that we'd love to see tours of Argentina from other countries, and I would absolutely put my hand up for that one. I think that's a fantastic thing, and we'd love to see teams going to Argentina to see their beautiful country and to give their people an opportunity to see more of the Los Pumas playing at home. I think that's also an important thing for the game of rugby in Argentina. Of course, the setup of rugby in Argentina is different to most places. A lot of the Argentinian players, or nearly all of them, go overseas to play their rugby in other domestic competitions, and that makes for a little bit of a dissected community within Argentina when it comes to growing the game. A lot of you have said though that the game's growing significantly in Argentina. A lot of kids are playing the game and picking up the rugby ball instead of kicking the soccer ball, which is a great thing, of course. And I'm sure the game is going to grow on the back of the Los Pumas' great impact that they're having across the world. They're getting a lot more fans, and they're getting a lot more fans coming to watch them play when they play in different places around the world. So I think this year's Rugby Championship was hugely groundbreaking for this Argentinian team. I think it's giving them a lot of confidence that they can move forward now and really take on the top teams in World Rugby on a consistent basis. That's really what we've got to see. And if I was to give a one-word summary on the Argentinian Los Pumas, it would be about consistency. And once they nail that on a regular basis, then they've got to be able to take on the better teams. So there we go. Those are my thoughts around Argentina in this year's Rugby Championship. For me, they were the breakout team. I loved watching them play when they were in full flow. And I'm sure from those games they lost this year, particularly against the All Blacks at Eden Park and against South Africa at Neilsprat, I'm sure they learned a lot from those two games, and they're going to be better because of it. I think Contepone's going to continue building depth in this Argentinian team. He's bringing in some new players. He's looking at some positional changes. He did that with Albanoz, and it's definitely worked, and they've got a superstar there in number 10. And I can only see this Argentinian team getting better as they head towards the Rugby World Cup in 2027. Now let me know in the comments what you thought of the Argentinian team this year in the Rugby Championship. What players stood out for you? And also tell me what areas of development do you think they need to focus on so they can take the top teams on in World Rugby on a consistent basis. I'd like to read your comments on that one. Okay, that's it for this particular video. Don't forget, we're doing a series on the Rugby Championship teams and how they've performed. Check out my one I've already done on the All Blacks. This is, of course, on Argentina. And we've got the Wallabies and the Springboks still to go. So make sure you check out those ones as well. If you're enjoying the content I'm putting out here on my channel, don't forget there's 5 ways in which you can support my channel. Here they are on the screen right now. A lot of you watch my videos every day and you don't subscribe to the channel yet. Please press that subscribe button if you can. It helps me out a lot. And I would also thank you for leaving your respectful comments, because that's very important when it comes to these YouTube algorithms and everything else. Okay, that's it for me from beautiful Mexico today. All that's left for me to say is you stay well, stay safe, enjoy your day and your rugby no matter where you are across the world. And I'll see you again really soon in the next episode. Until then, it's time to say adios. See you all again soon. Bye for now.